Hey everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Yo, what's happening, Rush Nation? It's time to celebrate. We've made it, Murph. We've made it to the 200th show of the little podcast that started on my dining room table, and now we're in the fancy studio. Actually, right now we're not because of COVID-19, as you can probably tell if you're watching on YouTube. But I thought, like the Arizona Cardinals did in celebrating how they got DeAndre Hopkins for basically nothing, we'd celebrate by getting ourselves a big dog too. How'd you fancy some of that action?
I love it. Although there's a lockdown going on and everything seems to just have slowed down, we just keep going. And this is a real privilege and a real honor to have our guest on today. That's for sure. 100%.
So I didn't ask you how you are, big man. How are you doing?
I'm good. My life doesn't change much other than work kind of stinks right now. I'm in sales, tech sales, and no one wants to buy anything. So I just have to keep faking it till I'm making it, and hoping that my boss doesn't realize that I'm not going to hit quota. To be fair, he's not hit quota. He's not hit quota either. So I've made more than him. So I should be okay.
Right, Rush Nation. Enough about COVID-19 until we get into the chat with today's guest. Let me introduce you to 1/3 of the fantasy footballers, top 10 most accurate analyst on Fantasy Pros in 2017, 2018, 2019, and probably next year as well, let's face it. And he also co-hosts the Spitballers podcast, which if you haven't listened to is magnificent. It's Jason Moore, everybody. Jason, welcome to 5 Yard Rush, buddy. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing as well as can be expected in the COVID era, and happy to be on for the 200th episode. That's not a small number.
No, it's really sort of snuck up on us as well. Like we've been trying to just put content out 2, 3, 4, 5 times a week in season, and it's like before you know it, it's just flying by. Like I remember doing the 50th and the 100th, thinking like, oh my God, we've done this many, and then like 200 just sort of coming. Like okay, but thanks for coming on. This is a pleasure. This is you were the first name on the top of the sheet, and I'm glad you said yes because I hadn't worked out who number 2 was going to be.
So I was the first and last. Well, I'm happy to be
Absolutely.
Here.
So, Jason, obviously the world's in complete lockdown right now. How are you coping with isolation, and have you got anything fun that you're doing to stay occupied?
The coping with isolation is, I think, different for parents. As a parent, it's not so much isolation so much as going crazy with your kids. Love them to death, but we've got 3 kids, twin 11-year-olds and a 7-year-old, and they go crazy. They get stir crazy. And when you got 3 stir crazy kids in the house, you go crazy. So my pro tip is something that, look, it wasn't my idea, but we did it yesterday. It was phenomenal. They did a can't leave the room challenge in a fort. They built a fort under our dining room table, and they stayed, the 3 of them, under there, and it was a can't leave challenge. We said it would be $100 to the winner. Whoever is the last one out gets $100. That was 17 hours of freedom. They stayed overnight in that thing. It was glorious. So, and they had a blast. You know, we gave them some electronics in there, and we'd give them food and a 60-second bathroom break when needed. But it was a fun thing for them. Gave us some peace, and it worked out.
Would you say that's the best $100 you've ever spent?
Oh, I mean, $100 for 17 hours of freedom? You can't. That's a great ROI.
Yeah.
And the truth is, I'm not giving them $100. Like, the truth is, they ended up pooling their money together to buy a video game, which I probably would have got them anyways because they've been wanting, and it's, they're locked in. So really, I just, whatever.
And who won?
My oldest son, the boy twin, won. Actually, they kind of split, the 2 boys. My daughter, last night when I tucked them into bed, she couldn't handle the sleeping on the floor. She was out early, but then the boys made it through the night.
Nice.
That's awesome.
I can't do that with my boy.
Yeah, he's not quite mastered that art yet. Whereas the good thing with mine is he's not overly mobile, although he does crawl or roll. He doesn't crawl yet. you can just put him in a place, and normally he's all right. Actually, he's quite an independent kid. He just wants to sit there and play with stuff. And as long as you put something there that he's not quite allowed to have, but it's just in reach, but too far out of reach, like you got to get the balance right, like a wire or a cable. If you can put it just so it's out of reach, but close enough to where he thinks he can get it, that's a good hour. That's an hour that he'll be focused trying to get that thing. It's amazing. I've mastered this. Like he sits in my makeshift office upstairs when the wife's like having a shower and needs some time, and I'm working, and I've mastered it. So he's just literally focused on that, and he can do that for a good hour, which is good. A way I figure it's like training for future.
No,
just setting him up for that disappointment. There's always going to be something. It's just going to be that little bit out of reach. You can keep going, but
well, you're going to need a better game, mate, because that time is going to run out real quick. Trust me.
Wow.
Let's
hope isolation ends first.
Yeah. So, Jason, we had Andy on. I don't remember when it was now. It was
about a year ago.
Yeah, if not a long one. So obviously, if you listen to the podcast, then you know how the Fantasy Footballers came about. But obviously, Andy and Mike started it, and then you won a little bit after them. How did you ending up on the Fantasy Footballers?
Yeah, I mean, it was still really early. I think they had a good solid 40 listeners when it was the two of them, or maybe 40 downloads from a few listeners. It was one of those things where we had all known each other for a long time at the company that I used to run, and we would talk fantasy football all the time. They started it because they started a podcast for our league, just for the 12 of us. And then they were like, after they were doing that for a year, they're like, well, let's, we know fantasy football. We're great at this. Let's make this for others. And I was a big fan. I supported them. I said I thought it was going to be big. And they brought me on for some of the business acumen and the comedic side. And then we took off, and it was good times have been had.
Most definitely. So where did you start recording? Obviously, because we started on my dining room table, and it was microphone things were crossed over each other, and we were in each other's pockets. So where did you guys start out?
We built a studio in what used to be Andy's oldest boy's room. He got the boot. So the boys shared a room, and we converted just a bedroom in the house into our first set. We were there for a couple of years, even as we grew and got a little bit larger, and we had our show that we were filming in this bedroom, syndicated on some cable networks. And people would we would trick them. We built a pretty nice studio in this little bedroom, and we'd get emails from time to time. Oh, I'm a musician, I'm a huge fan, I'm gonna be in Arizona, can I get a studio tour? I was like, no, we're not in this. You'd like kids sleeping down the hallway. This is just a house. You can't come in and see our bedroom. So, since then we've spent the last several years in a much nicer, true studio that we've built out. Now we do studio tours because there's something to see.
That's cool.
That's awesome.
It just shows you can start anywhere, isn't it? Really. I mean, in Andy's kid's bedroom or the kitchen table. That's one of the good things about podcasting. You can literally plug a headphone like I am into a Mac and do your whiz. So, yeah.
And I think with what's going on with COVID, I think you're going to see a lot of podcasts jump up, right? I think there's going to be a lot of people that will just start doing these, whether it's fantasy football, whether it's absolutely anything, right? And they'll be doing this thing because it's a low cost to entry to at least get started. But as everyone knows, it's not the starting that's the difficult bit. It's the constant going. And you guys your story is unbelievable. I didn't realize it was done in Andy's bedroom. That's so awesome. Like just to convert his bedroom and his boy's bedroom and to be where you are now, and then the sky's the limit. I think I said to one of you the other day, you guys need to come over here. Well, you guys will sell out arenas here, definitely. The amount of listeners, fans you've got over here, you definitely do a good arena. So
look, a couple of years from now, when the NFL has a team there full-time permanently, maybe we'll come across the pond and have a good live event there once we're all back out of our houses.
That'd be amazing.
So
although
go on, man.
I was gonna say, I'm not so sure we're gonna get a team over here anytime soon. I thought there was going to be some provisions in the CBA that were going to sort of make that a bit easier, but they haven't seemed to close some of those loopholes with regards to taxation or where game checks are are actually paid. And I think they're going to be the big things that are going to stop a team from being here for the next few years.
Yeah, the CBA shouldn't hold too much weight over that. You bring up a couple things that people will be unhappy with, but they have the allowance to do that. The owners do within the collective bargaining. I think it would be several years from now, 4 or 5 years from now, but I think it could be in this deal. And I think one of the reasons that could succeed is actually the 17 game schedule. It would allow an expansion of 2 more teams rather easily. And I know that they're wanting to just continually grow the product internationally. So we'll see. They'll definitely have more and more games there. Whether or not they'll get a team, I just think, look, the NFL's predictable. They do what makes money. You know, they're like, people are like, oh, is the NFL season going to happen? I'm like, look, these guys will do whatever it takes to make their money. I can't imagine them canceling any games ever. They're going to get theirs. They love that. They love that cash.
Yeah, definitely.
So, Jason, for those listeners who don't listen to your podcast, who do you support and why do you have them as your team?
We are all natives of Arizona in the United States, so we are the Arizona Cardinal diehard hometown fans. You know, we've had a long stretch of rough times. Really, since I've been a boy, the Cardinals have sucked with the exception of 2 little mini stretches. You know, we had the Kurt Warner years, which were glorious, and the Carson Palmer years, which were great. And outside of that, it has sucked. But, I mean, DeAndre Hopkins pairing with Kyler Murray, it's looking rosy.
It really is. I still maintain that the Arizona Cardinals all or nothing is the best all of nothing. All or nothing.
Bruce Arians is just so fun.
He really is. He's it's not just him. It was everything. I think the way that the Bidwells embraced it. I don't think you get like Jerry. When we went to Jerry's World, it was just a bit like mental. I don't think the owners have got in and dialed in the same way that the Bidwells did. They really sort of opened up everything and said, "This is what we are about," and they really embraced it. And I think that's what makes a good series. I just loved everything about it. I think I've gone and watched it like 5 or 6 times now because it's my favorite one. I'd rather watch that one than watch the Panthers one again, which was poor. And the Rams one was only interesting when Fisher got fired.
Yeah.
That was what made that series. Up until then, it was boring as heck.
It was terrible. Jason, water bets are a big thing of the Fantasy Footballers podcast. You guys use it as a method of winning a bet, as it were. What's your best water bet story?
Well, I mean, the best and worst is our league of record has done water bets for years, long before the podcast. In fact, this started at our Broken Bowl Game Studios, the company I used to run. We had a physical wheel that we built to punish people for losing. If you got shut out at foosball or shut out at ping pong or whatever, you were going to get watered. And so that's where it came from. But our league of record uses it as the punishment for the last place team. And what happens is they come in on draft day. We do a live draft, or at least did until probably this year. And, you know, we have everybody come. People are from around the country. They fly in. And the 11 owners that did not finish last each get to water the loser, and then that person has to draft soaking wet through the draft. It is awesome. And I hate to say it, I have we're in the league of record is a keeper league, and so it's feast and famine. Basically, if you want to win that thing, you can't just you have to tank. If you want, you've got to trade for picks and have a super team the next year. So I have faced the water side of that before, and it sucks. It sucks big time. But yeah.
We're going to have to do something. I mean, we don't really have a league of record because I'm not counting your home dynasty team that you let me gate crash last year with my absolute dumpster fire of a garbage team with no picks and no talent.
I did not force you to take that team, though.
No, but someone needed to make it competitive. And that's what
That's not me, because my team's godly.
Well, yeah, because you stole all the players. But we need to bring in some form of forfeit. Do you know what? That's going to be one of the listener leagues. We're going to do something that is going to be a forfeit related. Okay. Might be that Jersey league that we've been muting about. Stay tuned for that one for the summer.
I don't. Also on Waterbets, Jason. I don't suppose you saw my one that we tweeted at Andy. I got a tractor load of water tipped on top of me.
Oh, I think I have seen that. I didn't realize that was yours. Yes, water bets can be a lot of fun.
I don't even know what I lost, and I just thought I'm not going to get a cup of water thrown over me. I'm going to pour a tractor over me and make this big time.
Wasn't that a guy that you met through the Ballers League, and you lost a water bet to him about a player?
Yes, Devontae Adams going over 1,000 yards.
That was it.
Yes.
How do I know that better than you?
Because I lost. I've wiped it out of my memory.
That's a fair point.
Yeah.
But,
so, go on, Murph.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, this is a fantasy football podcast. You are the fantasy footballers. Let's talk some fantasy football. How did your 2019 season go as a whole?
Went very well. Back-to-back champion in our main dynasty league 2 years running. We had several leagues that we were in as a group. We played in a league with Juju Smith-Schuster and Ninja, and kind of a celebrity league. We took that down, and we were in another kind of celebrity league with through the NFL Network and with some of their experts, and we took the expert bracket down. We lost in the championship to a Saquon Barkley, Kenyon Drake combo. We played the number 1 and number 2 running back on the same week that week, and that was rough. But we had a real successful year. It was very good. A lot of championships.
In that league, we had Erica Tamposi on, and she took great pride in not watching you guys win.
I'll bet, because we talked some trash. Nobody wanted us to win except us.
You were Public Enemy's number 1. Some of the programs behind that, we don't get them all here, but I did watch quite a few of them online, and they were great. The draft scenes themselves, because that was a live draft as well, wasn't it, for the most of you? I think?
Yeah, Mike and I were there. Andy was not part of the draft, but he helped us through the season with decisions.
Amazing. It's a shame about Drake, but
Yeah.
We'll let you off on that one. In terms of the leagues itself, do you remember how many leagues you played in last year?
Well, so I look, I've got four main leagues, 3 primary, and then one okay, there's enough people here that I really care about that I think there's 4 leagues I play in. There are a lot more than that in general, all the leagues that we co-own together or kind of businessy, some CBS or someone wants us to participate in a thing, countless best balls in those. But really, I'm in 4 primary leagues that I personally care about, and I don't want to go wider than that because I've actually pared down to that. As we grew in popularity, we get invited to everything, and then eventually we were in too many leagues, and it's like I think some of the things that makes us special are the fact that we're real fantasy football players. Like, I care about my league to the nth degree. And a lot of analysts that have been doing this for a long, long time, they're just in so many leagues, and it's such a job that that gets lost. And so, we're in basically four leagues where the 3 of us are basically in those leagues together personally, and we care about them.
That's a nice amount for Murph. Just take note of that, buddy. We're in we're in way too many leagues.
Yeah, but I think your point is, like, you get invited to leagues, and again, it's about, you have the leagues you care about, and then you have the leagues you do. Like, we participate, same as you, we co-own in all of our listener leagues because we're trying to grow the fantasy football population here. There's a lot of people that play still those crummy NFL auto leagues with bots, or people who quit after like a week. There's still people that can't play in a genuine 12-team league with their friends here because they don't know 11 other people that are into the NFL here. It's getting bigger, and like the NFL is growing, but then there's that point of entry of, I'm into NFL, but I don't know about fantasy. So how do I get involved? And I still don't know if I can convince 11 of my friends or 9 of my friends to do it. So that's why we host as many leagues as we do, because we want to make sure that nobody has to go through that crappy experience of playing in a league where they don't know anyone and there's no chat or anything like that.
Yeah, if you play in a league like that, then that's the last time you ever play. You say fantasy football is not fun, and that wouldn't be fun. You can also, you say, you believe we've got a lot of fans over on that side of the planet. And if that's true, you can go to footclanleagues.com, where we've got kind of a forum where you can find local, online local people to play with that are all into the sport and love it. So, I have no doubt that we've had plenty of Foot Clan leagues find themselves, in your neck of the woods from that area as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, because we've both played them before, and they're great fun. So definitely that's another avenue. And I think that's why we have so many leagues, because we play in leagues that we just play against listeners or just friends of listeners who just need a place to at least start. I'd rather people playing, if I have to play in 50 leagues, so someone can play in a league that at least has a bit of trash talking and a bit of fun in it, then yeah, so be it. I'm okay with that. It's I know it's not going to be forever. Like I'm sure we'll do what you've done and trim down at some point. But one of the questions I'm really keen on, and I ask every analyst this, in terms of, it's all about what you talk about on the show all the time, about your book, your things you must remember from the 2019 season or whatever season we're on. I know you've done this recently, but what would you say were the biggest glaring takeaways from the 2019 season that you're going to definitely stick to in 2020?
One of the things I wanted to remember going into last year, I did, and it worked swimmingly, is to avoid the injury dip. People get great ADPs. You can buy them in the draft for super cheap because they're kind of dealing with injury. AJ Green, people were getting him in the 4th round. What a steal. And it was one of those things where if there was a guy who was dealing with an injury, he kind of tweaked his hamstring in camp, or he's coming off of X, Y, or Z, I just avoided it because look, I mean, everybody out there, when you're picking between player X and player Y in round Z, it doesn't matter. Like, they're all going to be near enough to each other in value that why have the extra risk of the injury? So that's one thing. And then the other thing, I think I was a little too weak. Historically speaking, rookie wide receivers, they don't do well. I almost never draft them at least in the first half of the year. By the end of the year, they do well, so long as you're not talking about 2014. But this past season, we saw a lot of players hit early. Terry McLaurin, Marquise Brown, and that combined with this incoming draft class that's highly touted, I think I'll be a little bit more aggressive with rookie wide receivers in 2020.
Okay, I like that, because in my best ball, I've taken rookie wide receivers all over the place, because I think at least once I've got my core built, I think then maybe if one of them goes off, I've done all right so far. So
yeah. I'll go with that, which leads nicely on to strategy. So how do you get ready for the season? How do you prepare for your drafts? What are some top tips you can share with people who are listening to this or watching this?
I prepare poorly. One of the worst parts about doing this full time, which is basically 99% great parts, when we used to go to our League of Record draft, the 2 weeks preceding that draft were just hobbyist dedication to that draft. I knew where everybody's picking, because it's a keeper league, so trades and picks is just, every round is just a hodgepodge of different people. So I know, okay, this guy has got needs here, and you study the other teams in the league and say, what are they going to need coming in? Where do they have gaps where they don't get to pick? You do mock drafts specific to your league. You go, okay, Troy always takes Chargers or whatever. And when you draft and fill out the rosters, you kind of see, okay, I think based on our league, this guy's going to go here. I'm going to need to jump up to this pick if I want that guy, all those situations. Now I don't do any of that. I just don't have time to do that. But on the flip side, I am full-time in fantasy. I know the values of players, hopefully as good as anybody in the world. And so I think we just kind of, it's a give and take. So as far as how I prepare for my draft is, I have a full-time job where I study fantasy football, and then I just get to the draft and show up. I guess the only other thing I would throw out there, and this is an oldie but a goodie, something that from however long you've played, you've heard, whether it was Matthew Berry or someone else, you do need to take advantage of the rules in your league. So every now and then, if it's a league I'm popping into that is new to me or I've been invited, there's these fantasy football eliminators for fantasy cares that I take part in every year. And they have wacky rules. It's not just, it's whether it's tight end premium or a different kind of best ball lineup that, people don't realize is like, you don't need any position in that league. You don't have to draft a running back or a wide receiver. It's just players. And so if your first two picks in that league are not both quarterbacks, you're an idiot. But then you feel dumb because you're not used to doing that in most leagues. So you have to, study at least the specifics of your league, but most leagues are similar enough.
So you bring on an interesting point on tight end premium. So this is a hotbed, a conversation between Stockton and I and other people. I'm one of these people that in a tight end premium that unless I'm going to nab one of the top 3 or 4 tight ends, I just ignore its tight end premium, because once you get outside of those top 3, top 4, they're all one pretty much samey. There's not a lot of tier difference from tight end 5 to tight end 12. And second of all, there's always a guy on the waiver wire that is in the tight end position that will always elevate above the rest of that tier anyway. I've seen that for the last 3 or 4 years. I've always been a draft tight end late guy. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you always just go, right, it's tight end premium, I'm going to take one early if I can, if not, still draft one? Or would you just bin it and just pick a guy late?
It depends on the specifics of the tight end premium. If it's like, okay, they get 1.5 points per reception, then, I'm obviously going to factor that in. So our ultimate draft kit, we've got custom scoring now. So I would make a league in there where it just shows the actual difference in projections for a guy that's going to get 1.5. And I still just draft based on tiers. Whatever tier I want to get a tight end, if I want to make sure I get, maybe I like tight end, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Those guys, I don't want to go lower than that. Then I'll just wait as long as I can and grab one of those guys. But of course, in a tight end premium league, I'm always willing to take one of those early guys. I'm not. I mean, they're such an advantage because of consistency. You talk about tight end 7. Tight end 7 will suck. Like he will, like that sounds great at the end of the year, but he sucked all through the year. And so it's not good enough to just have one that you could play. You've got to play the streaming game all year long if you don't have one of the top 3 guys. So that's how I'd approach it.
No, that's cool. We played the Scottish Bowl last year, and we didn't pick a tight end until I think the 13th round, 12th or 13th round.
Mm-hmm.
And we were doing fine until we picked Will Disley in the 19th round, and that was going really well until
Big Montana got hurt.
Yeah, that started to spell the end because we had Jack Doyle. Who else do we take?
Yeah, it wasn't good apart from Will Disley.
Yeah. Well, Jack Doyle came good at the end. I mean, it was fine, but then we'd run into big Darius Slayton, and that was the end of our run in the playoffs. But
Darius.
In terms of then, when you're thinking about preseason and things to note before the season, what are the big things that you look at? Is it training camp? Is it OTAs? Is it preseason? Or is it none of that and just following what teams have invested, say, in the draft and their draft capital and transactions?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly follow the money and the transactions more than any of the news and the blurbs. It's really a case-by-case basis. I mean, there are certain beat reporters that over time you learn you can trust and that they have an ear. And then there are, but if you don't know that, then it's better off to trust nobody and just say, I don't know. In the preseason, I think that is telling a little bit when it comes to just depth chart order. They're still going to be vanilla, but who they put out first or second or third, if you're talking about running backs in a murky timeshare, I look for that. How tight ends are going to be utilized. Tight ends tend to be they play more of the real game in the preseason because there's more to the position. So those are some things I look for. But for the most part, I mean, when you're obsessing, what is this? This is March still? I mean, when you're obsessing over fantasy football at this time of year, I think you'd be better off ignoring most of the stuff in that time of year and trusting what the months of research have led you to believe.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I think if you do enjoy fantasy football as much as the three of us and you guys do over on your pod, then it just becomes a massive blur anyway, and March might as well be August.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm riding high on the TB12 train, so all good over here.
Look, shush you.
Buccaneers fan, huh?
That's right. So, we don't get to have nice days at all. So I'm enjoying the I know the 2019 or 2020 season, or 2020 season, I don't remember what year it is. I know it's not going to kick off on time because we got TB12. Like, we don't have nice things in Tampa. They don't exist.
Right. I know if you missed the 2020 season, the guys like Tom Brady and Drew, it's just so not fair. It's like, wait. We don't have a big window here. You don't get to just now be 43.
Yeah. And then 44, and who knows what's going to happen. But, yeah, so that's why it's my theory. I don't think we're going to start on time. It's just for that alone. I think Tampa broke it. And we can blame Jason Light for that as well if we don't kick off on time.
I hate to break into your... have you guys seen The Purge, the movie The Purge?
No.
I am aware of it, and I think I've seen about half of it.
Okay, so when The Purge starts, there's a huge air raid siren. It's a very unique air raid siren. Somebody's driving around my estate playing that really loud.
Oh, fantastic. That's got to be fun.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I can hear some sort of air raid siren out the window. I better just check it isn't real. But no, it's just some clown playing The Purge.
Well, it is April Fool's Day tomorrow, or yesterday, depending on when you're listening on hearing this.
Yes. So do you do anything special, Jason, for planning for the playoffs? Key factors when managing your roster, getting into the playoff push?
Oh, yeah. Defenses. That's, I think, the secret sauce to the playoffs. I don't care about having flyer options or a lot of depth come playoff time. If I know my team is playoff bound, I'm locked that up, I'm a week or two away, I will happily carry 3 defenses on my roster looking at the actual schedule of those weeks, even if I've got a good defense, because I don't want my opponents to be able to pick them up and play them. And usually those things work out because, look, in the beginning of the year, you think you know which defenses are great and which ones aren't, and you're always wrong. People weren't drafting the Patriots to be the best fantasy defense of all time coming into last year. It was 2 years ago, you were drafting the Jaguars as the best thing ever, and then they just sucked. But by the end of the year, you know which defenses are good, and more importantly, you know which offenses are just so atrocious that whoever plays against them puts up giant points. And so if you're planning ahead before your fellow playoff mates are planning, then you just get your pick of the litter. And I mean, you're talking about 10-point swings in a fantasy game for 1 week victory, win and you're in, lose and you're out. So that would be my number one takeaway. Number two might be a similar strategy if you know who your opponent's going to be, you know how the seeding lines up, or maybe you're already in the playoffs and you see that, okay, if I win this game and I'm in the championship, I'm definitely going to be playing that team. And their specific situation is they're streaming quarterbacks and they don't have a good week 16 matchup. You just try to plan 2 weeks out, or maybe even 3 weeks out if you've got the luxury on your roster to block a tight end or a quarterback if you are going to come up to a team that utilizes streaming.
Yeah, we often say grab people that your opponents might want, and then you can block them that way. But yeah, decent advice. So I suppose last thing on this then, what are your 3 top keys to success to help your listeners, our listeners, anybody who's listening whatsoever to win their leagues?
Probably listen to the fantasy footballers, right? I mean, you gotta win, so you gotta listen to the best. Keep playing till the end. that was my biggest. That was the piece of advice that changed for me as a player. I spent a decade when I first started out in fantasy where I loved it. I would have fun. Oh my gosh, the work that went into the draft and, the smack talk and all that. And every year I would be okay at the end. I'd make the playoffs, be out first, or I'd be the team right out of the playoffs, didn't get in. And whenever that happened, basically, I don't know if you're aware of this, but everybody in your league except for one person will not win the championship. And every time that happened, I basically quit. I was just done. I was like, well, my team is out, and so I didn't follow through. I didn't look at transactions. I didn't continue watching the NFL the same way. And so the next year that had an enormous effect on me. I wouldn't realize guys like AJ Brown who really broke out or shifts on teams. You look at the Rams the first half and the second half of the year. They're two different teams. And so a lot of times I'm playing on too old of knowledge the next season. And then that keeps me from, so I would say play to the end. If you've got a bad record, just keep playing, just keep having fun, set your lineups, do a better job. It might not be for this year, but so many of us been playing for so long with the same group. It's just fun. So that would be a piece of advice. And somewhat similar to that, I've said this a million times on our show, but you don't win a championship at the draft. The draft is the most fun day of the year. It's the most important day of the year, but that's not where you win a championship. So it's really, if you're saying, what are my tips to winning a championship? You're going to win that with your start sit decisions and your waiver wire pickups. I mean, I literally won our championship in our league of record, or not the league of record, our main listener league, it was 3 years ago. And I had one person, and this is a 14-team league. I had one person that I drafted, and I won the championship with a roster completely of different pieces. So, it's those transactions that really put you over the top. And I'll bet you if you go back and look in your leagues and look at who won the championship and look at their team and then go back and look at the roster moves they made, so many were built on waiver wire transactions, picking up the right person or maybe a trade here or there. It's a little bit harder to see how good they were at choosing start sit decisions, but it's the weekly transactions that are going to do it.
I love that advice. And the one thing I love more is playing to the end. I played in the league last year, one of the few leagues that didn't make the playoffs in. I won my week 13. Yeah, my week 13 matchup to deny a team from getting into the playoffs. I still remember that. That's awesome. And also, you end the season with a dub. That's what you want. All right, I ended up, I think I ended up 4-9 or something. It was horrific. I just I picked a lot of guys. It didn't really work out, and that was fine. But to end that and to end this season, that was awesome. I was quite happy with that. And that's the whole thing is, especially when you're playing in leagues where you get to know people and you talk trash over the year. That's why being in a fun league is so important, because you've got these personal grudges week on week. My motivation, I got invited into Stocks' Dynasty League with an absolute toilet. It was an absolute car crash. Mm-hmm. And my whole motivation was to finish as high as I could, because the guy who rinsed my team of all my first round draft capital for the first 3 years, I was like, I want this guy picking at the end or as close to the end of the first round. That was my pure motivation for that league. I don't have a first round pick, so there's no point in tanking. Right. So I'm just going to finish as high as I can. I think I came 5th. So that guy's now picking at the back end of round 1, as opposed to where he was thinking, right, I've got the 101, I'm locked, I'm all set. That was my whole motivation for the whole year, was just so that guy who rinsed my team for absolutely nothing is picking. He's now not getting a Swift or a Taylor. He's going to be lucky to get. He might get Dobbins if he's lucky.
How dare you? Dobbins is going before Swift.
Oh, well, there you go. What?
Yeah,
100%. We'll leave that for another day.
Okay, let's talk some 2020 fantasy football. You're in a dynasty league, and let's presume the Bengals take Burrow and the Dolphins take Tua. You need a quarterback, Jason. Who are you taking?
It's got to be Burrow. just because of the injury risk. It's the piece of advice I gave earlier, right? They both could be good. They both could be great. They both could be busts. One of them has a massive injury that they're coming off of, and one of them doesn't. I'm going to go ahead and take the guy who's healthy and has just less of a red flag. I would definitely take Tua if they were both healthy. I mean, I would take the more mobile quarterback that's going to add fantasy points running the ball. But no, there's no reason in the world that I would draft Tua over Burrow while you have no proof of health for that player.
So on that logic, let's say, for example, the Chargers take Herbert, and we think he's going to beat Tyrod Taylor out. Or if he doesn't even beat him out to start with, and we've got a Baker Mayfield situation, he's going to be the QB in waiting. Would you still take Herbert over Tua on that knowledge, or would you think that Tua at his peak could be incredible and therefore would be willing to pay? I guess I'm trying to gauge.
Sure, yeah. How far does the injury risk matter? And, where the injury risk matters is as a tiebreaker, as when you've got guys that are basically in the same tier. You've got two players that might go back-to-back in a rookie draft. Well, if one of them is injured and one of them isn't, I'm going to take the one that isn't. In the case of Herbert, he'd probably be a lot cheaper, lower down in the draft, which ironically means I will also take Herbert, not over Tua, but I would bypass Tua and take Herbert much later at a cheaper value, because when I'm bypassing Tua earlier, I'm drafting another player, presumably a running back or wide receiver, which I care about a whole lot more than quarterbacks.
Nice.
Yeah.
So then this running back class has been famed in terms of probably one of the best ones we've had in the last few years. And I appreciate we don't know landing spots yet, which is always going to massively change the outcome. But if you were just ranking this based on what you've seen, what you've researched,
Sure.
How are you ranking the running backs in this class? And if you were sort of drafting on talent, where would you rank these guys?
So Jonathan Taylor is my number one. He would be, I believe he's just the best back. I don't have any concerns of his pass catching. People talk about Clyde Edwards-Helaire as this great pass catching back, and if you look at how their teams utilize them, Jonathan Taylor in his final season had a greater receiving market share. It's like, that can't be right. If you look at it, Helaire had over twice as many catches, but they were in an offense that runs that way. So I've got him 1, I've got Swift 2, I've got Dobbins 3. Sorry. I am not a big fan of Edwards-Helaire personally. That's not to say I think he is bad. I don't look at him, when Ronald Jones was coming out, I thought he was bad. I thought, he's got a lot of hype, but he's got no shot. I don't think that with Helaire because of his pass catching ability, but what I see is a power back. The way he plays to me is a guy who, initiates contact, plays tough and rough, and he's 207 pounds. And that's just not that style. I just don't think is going to work in the NFL. Obviously, draft capital will matter. I really like Cam Akers. I'd put him probably 4th on the list. I don't have all my notes here in front of me to go too deep, but I liked him. And Eno Benjamin to me is, him and Helaire are so similar to me as prospects that one is going to cost a lot and one is going to be cheap if you like that skill set. Any other specific guys you want me to someone you love that you think or hate?
Well, your top 4 is the same as my top 4. That's where I'm at. I kind of flipped about 2-3 weeks ago. Edwards-Helaire, I've done the same. I've moved him slightly down. I moved Cam Akers up. I even got rid of my Free Shoes University bias and moved him up the board, which is a hard thing for me to do, having being a Florida Gator. It's quite hard to to like guys who went to Free Shoes University, but I liked Jameis, so it's not unprecedented. It can happen.
Cam Akers, Cam Akers is bizarre. I've never watched, in all the years of scouting incoming rookies, I have never, ever, ever seen a worse offensive line.
It's terrible.
I can't even watch the tape. It's so not fun to watch Cam Akers tape because it's like, just the quarterback. I mean, it's just like they are like 10, 12 sacks a game, and the hit behind so it's like it's hard to evaluate him. But then every time that he gets an opportunity to say, okay, when I personally scout, I put a lot of stock into what happens when you get into the situations where it's a 50-50 shot. It's the defender has a shot, the offensive lineman has a shot. It's not like, he already had a huge head of steam and he can run past him. It's like, this play just happened to give one of these opportunities where it's like, this is the back versus the defensive back or linebacker or whatever. And that's where I didn't see Allaire win a lot. And that's where I see Akers win all the time.
I mean, to shine on that team, which is just abysmal. I mean, I loved it. I love watching it because as a Gator, it's just amazing to watch how bad a team are. And when that bowl record ended, I was like, because that's all you ever heard from Free Shoes University fans. You just heard from, we've been in bowl games for 40 years or however long their record went on for. And, that's just a badly run program now that needs to be retooled and rebuilt up from the beginning. And it's been on the decline for a while, but Cam Akers was always one that shone past. What about the one guy we've missed in this is Zach Moss? Because he's someone that's kind of
Moss. No,
really?
He's garbage. Zach Moss would be more akin to my belief in Ronald Jones from years ago. He's no, it's not gonna happen in the NFL for Zach Moss.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, it was one of those things. I'm not a combine guy. I just don't care what your combine score says. I don't. Arian Foster, one of the fastest backs I've ever watched in my life on a football field, just glides past people. I think he was like a 4.65. Who cares? If you play fast, you play fast. If you play slow, you play slow. You look at Dalvin Cook. But before the combine, Zach Moss, I watched and I'm like, this dude's slow. Like he's game film slow. He's a heavy guy. What is he, like 235 or something? He's a big boy, and in college that could kind of work, and he could do some things that he's not going to be able to do in the NFL. So I'm not a big fan of Zach Moss at all.
Okay. Interesting.
I've drafted him nearly every best ball so far because he's. But like late round when all the other players are just nobodies, I thought Zach Moss, why not? He might have one good game, but
yeah, I mean these are just my opinions. They've been known to be wrong time and again, but
not often,
usually I will say usually with running backs, rookie running backs, I trust my scouting. I've said this before. I don't really trust my scouting of incoming rookie quarterbacks. I just I've got a track record personally where I go, Deshaun Kaiser, I was a big believer. Deshaun Watson, I wasn't. When it comes to quarterbacks, I tend to read up on other people that I believe know the quarterback position better and try to put my rankings, both personally when I'm drafting, ahead of my own scouting. But when it comes to rookie running backs, I feel like my track record there has been pretty good. So I trust myself there.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. You've definitely proven it over the years I've listened, and I'm going to have to go and watch some more Zach Moss because I do like him. I do think he has some abilities, and the one thing I like is he hasn't shown a lot of fumbling issues, so I know he can protect the ball. But then also is I know he's going to be difficult to bring down. If he's running game speed slow, then that's obviously something to worry about. But I'm thinking he might be a guy that might be pulled onto a team and be a goal line back and bruise his way over the line. But it depends on who takes him, and it's all about draft capital spent and all these things. But I see him going in the third round to an NFC team who just want to use a power back to get additional touchdowns. So that's why I'm kind of curious on him, but I'm not sold in the same way that I am on the top 4, but he is one I've got an eye on. But if you're telling me he sucks, I might have to watch again. And
I generally go back and watch again. So sometimes my opinions change on a guy, but my first takes on Zach Moss was no, thank you.
So let's move on to somebody who's been in the league a little while, and that's Tom Brady, for our resident Bucks fan, Murph over there. Where do you have Brady ranked right now in your quarterback rankings? And then moving on, do you think Godwin and Evans are affected by having Brady in a big way, or do they have, say, floors or lower floors? What's your thoughts on the Bucks?
Yeah, I like Brady. I think Brady's going to be a good fantasy option, which he hasn't been in several years. But, the weapons that the Patriots have not been good. I mean, even when they had Gronk the last time around, he was injured, wasn't the same, and then they haven't had him for a while. And Edelman's great when he's out there on the field, but outside of that, it's like, who has he had to throw the ball to? I think Brady's going to be good. I'm really excited for Tampa Bay's rookie running back. Don't know who it is yet, but it's going to happen. So whoever that is, he'll be on a lot of my teams, getting dump offs from Brady. As far as Evans and Godwin on that side, and to speak to the ranking, I haven't done my official rankings yet because I stat all the players out post-draft. I imagine Brady will probably be around 15, which I am fine drafting anyone in the top 20. So, there's 20 quarterbacks I like every year. Brady will be one of them. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, I still think are great. They do both get a slight dip. I mean, you just look at the math. I think Jameis is usually on pace to throw near 5,000 yards, and Brady's not going to do that. He's going to throw for 4,500 yards. I think the touchdowns will be the same, but if you take 500 yards of receiving away from their core, then it's a bump down. But I actually argued we just had a overreaction episode, and I was saying to not overreact to Mike Evans. I think people just want to crush the dude. Like, oh, the deep ball is gone. Jameis just chucking it up there is gone. Look, he's 26 years old. He's a beast of an NFL wide receiver, and he just got the greatest quarterback all time. Yeah, maybe he doesn't get the same yards per reception that he got with Jameis just slinging it, but maybe he gets more red zone utilization, a wiser method, and has 12, 13 touchdowns. So, I like both guys. Their floors are a little lower. Their ceilings are a little lower. But I think they could both be, wide receiver ones again this year.
Yeah, I agree. I think with Evans, everyone's sitting there wanting to shoot the guy down. The guy's for his first 6 seasons in the league has got 1,000 yards in each season. So he's always nailed on to do it again with Brady, barring injury or some kind of amazing collapse. So I can't see. He's proven it year on year. I think anyone that's got that reliability, he's got an upgrade at the position. Okay, he might not get 1,500 yards this year, but you can almost put it in pen that he'll get 1,000 yards and
I agree.
half a dozen touchdowns this year, and that's going to be good enough to be in the top 15, 18 wide receivers this year. And that's you're penning that in as the absolute floor. So I've seen him going in some drafts at the moment, late third round, thinking this is just nuts. I'd be buying him all day long in the third round, easily, no difficulty at all. I've got a question just on the tight ends. Where do you think the tight end production is going to come from? Do you think it will come from Bray, or do you reckon OJ Howard is going to magically return back to what everyone really hopes and believes he's going to be?
I think OJ Howard will be better this year. I was reading this really, really in-depth article that was on ESPN earlier today, talking about specific routes run, distances on certain areas of the field, and percentage of throws from Jameis and Brady and their tendencies to use tight ends. And I think OJ Howard has a significant bump up this year. Coming into this past season, there was the expectation that he was going to jump into that upper echelon, be that George Kittle, be that guy that really now is a must-have. I think he showed, based on opportunity, Arian's system, his own drops, that probably won't happen. But I do think OJ Howard now, I've brought this up in the studio, and the other two guys, they're happy to leave him for dead. They're saying no, thank you. fool me once situation where they're saying not going to go through it again. And I do think O.J. Howard would be the tight end to own, and I think he will be utilized more. Bruce Arians latches on to guys that he rides rough. I know when he was here in Arizona, David Johnson and the left tackle DJ Humphries, those guys, just for some reason, he was brutal to. And you saw DJ Humphries kind of wilt, and you saw David Johnson take the challenge. And so that's really what I'm curious about is what O.J. Howard comes back mentally, because he is getting it from Arians. Arians he just latches onto certain guys and just destroys them in media, in front of them. We had lucky enough to sat down with David Johnson several times, and when he was here, we were big fans from years past, and he's told some stories of just he's such a player's coach, but then he'll pick his guys. That's where all my anger goes. and that's O.J. Howard. So if he comes back mentally strong, I think he'll be all right. I mean, the drop rate that O.J. Howard had this last year was astronomical.
Yeah.
But it's not like this was the first time we've ever seen O.J. Howard. And drops are not a predictive stat. They're not sticky. So I expect that to change.
No, I agree. One final question then. And couldn't let you leave without giving us one sort of spicy hot take for the 2020 fantasy season. So appreciate it's way too early, but what would be right now, hand to the pump, your spicy hot take prediction for the 2020 fantasy season?
My spicy hot take prediction. Well, I'm going to keep this local and fresh and say that Kenyon Drake will be a top 6 fantasy running back. He'll be in that tier with Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook, those guys this season. He basically averaged over 100 yards per scrimmage and a touchdown per game. If you actually take the running back one performance from each week for the Arizona Cardinals season, first year under Cliff Kingsbury, and you just say, okay, well, the first couple of weeks it was David Johnson, then Chase Edmonds had his game where everyone was pissed because David Johnson was active, but Chase was actually the guy given the workload, and then they trade for Kenyon Drake. If you take that running back one performance from those 16 weeks, it already was the running back 3 in fantasy football as far as team goes. So the opportunity is there. I've always been a Kenyon Drake believer coming out of college. In the talent, he was mired behind Adam Gase, which if you've listened to our show, we don't think Adam Gase is a very good coach. And so, yeah, I think he's got the opportunity to explode this year.
To be fair, I'm still waiting to find somebody who does think Adam Gase is a good coach outside of the NFL. Because I've yet to meet anybody.
He keeps getting jobs. That's what's crazy. Does he have, dirt on these owners, or I don't know?
I reckon he has probably the biggest dossier going. And he just literally just whacks it out in front of people because GMs go, but he always manages to stick around.
He gets his GMs fired, like not because of bad coaching, actively goes and says, I want him out. And the owners are like, yep, I agree with you.
See y'all later.
It's amazing that money train of Peyton Manning just continues to pay out.
I mean, he was so good with Peyton. He was so good. But so would I. I would have been great as an offensive coordinator if Peyton Manning was my quarterback.
I love it.
Tell me about it. So, Jason, obviously, most of our listeners do listen to your great podcast. But if they don't, why don't you let Rush Nation know where they can find you and the guys? Yeah, the fantasyfootballers.com. Very easy to find. We've got links to everything, all of our podcasts, our videos, our ultimate draft kit. All that stuff is there. And you alluded to it. We've got our Spitballers comedy podcast that is not fantasy football. It's just a fun, family-friendly comedy show. So for those with families that, most comedy podcasts you can't put on, you can. And if you're locked in with your kids and your family and your household, throw that on. The Spitball, you'll have a good time. It's all nonsense. We talk. It's very serious stuff. Big topics. It is brilliant. It really is.
It's very competitive, especially around drafts.
That's true.
Jason, man, thank you so much for coming on. We hugely appreciate your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Congrats on 200.
Thanks, man.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
We'll chat soon. Right, Rush Nation. Jason just said it. Congratulations on 200 episodes, Murph. Congrats, big man.
Congrats to you. You were here episode 1. I sort of gate crashed around episode 30. I did the Jason Moore experience and jumped in when, when you'd done all the hard work and got it started. And, now we are where we are. But appreciate you letting me ride this train with you. It's a pleasure. And here's to the next 200.
Absolutely. Wouldn't have it any other way. Right, Rush Nation. I hope you enjoyed this absolute blockbuster. But as always, until next week, don't forget, keep rushing.